The air in the conservatory hung thick and still, smelling faintly of damp earth and expensive perfume. My hands, clammy inside my small clutch bag, felt clumsy as I adjusted a non-existent wrinkle on my dress. Every eye in the room seemed to pivot, not on me, but on the space I occupied, a silence falling that felt heavier than the ornate chandelier hanging overhead. They weren't looking at me with recognition, not really. It was appraisal, pity, maybe, confirmation of a story they'd already been told. And across the room, framed by a cluster of polite, horrified faces, stood my husband. His smile, usually so easy, so charming, was frozen, a brittle mask cracking around the edges. He looked at me like I was a ghost, a bad dream he'd conjured but couldn't control. The hum of conversation died completely. The only sound was the faint classical music, a mocking soundtrack to this silent, tense tableau. If you've ever walked into a room and felt the weight of judgment press down on you, like the air itself is against you, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It truly helps me more than you know. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Not the silence, not the stares, not the man who looked like my husband but was a stranger. Just a few months ago, this room would have felt warm, familiar, filled with laughter, shared memories, the easy camaraderie of old friends who had known us both for years. Our life together, before it became this twisted theater, it was comfortable. A well-worn armchair, kind of comfortable. We had the house, the jobs, the rhythm of routine carved out over a decade. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, quiet dinners in, the occasional weekend away. And we had them. Our friends. A core group, woven into the fabric of our marriage, our shared history. They were the witnesses to our story, the extended family we chose. Sunday brunches that stretched into afternoons, holiday dinners where the noise level was borderline offensive, impromptu weeknight drinks just because. They knew our quirks, our arguments, our inside jokes. They were the solid ground beneath our feet. Or so I thought. It started subtly. A missed call returned with a vague apology. A planned dinner canceled last minute. My friend Sarah, usually so quick to text back, taking hours, sometimes a full day. I'd ask Mark about it, my husband. Everything okay with Sarah? I'd ask, folding laundry or washing dishes, the domestic rhythm lulling me into a false sense of security. He'd shrug, not meeting my eyes. Oh, people are busy, or she mentioned something about feeling a bit overwhelmed lately. Nothing to do with us. The first time someone said something truly odd was over the phone. My friend Chloe. We were planning a shopping trip. She was talking about dates, then paused. Are you sure you're up for it, though? She asked, her voice hesitant, laced with a pity I couldn't understand. Up for it? It was shopping, not climbing Everest. I laughed it off. Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be? There was another pause. Oh, okay. Just checking. Mark mentioned, well, he said you were feeling a bit fragile. That things had been difficult. Fragile? Difficult? Yes, life had its ups and downs, didn't everyone's? We'd had a few disagreements, sure. Who doesn't after 10 years? But fragile? The word felt alien, like a label someone else had slapped on me. I pressed Chloe gently. Difficult how? What did Mark say? She immediately backpedaled, stumbled over her words. Oh, nothing really. Just that you were under a lot of stress. He was just being a concerned husband, I guess. Her voice was too bright, too quick. The conversation ended awkwardly, the shopping trip never materializing. That was the first chip in the glass. Then another and another. A friend canceling plans because she didn't want to overwhelm me. Someone else asking if I was getting enough rest. The questions were always delivered with a soft, careful tone, as if I were made of spun glass and the slightest breeze might shatter me. It was confusing, disorienting. What was Mark saying? Why weren't they talking to me directly? I confronted him, of course. Sat him down after dinner, the leftovers cooling on the table between us. His eyes were wide and innocent. Saying what, love? I don't know what you're talking about. I told him about Chloe, about the others. He sighed, a put-upon sound. Oh, for God's sake. Yes, I might have mentioned you were feeling a bit stressed with work, or that you were tired. What's wrong with that? I'm your husband, I worry about you. I'm allowed to tell our friends you're not feeling 100%. He made it sound like I was being unreasonable, paranoid. He twisted my genuine confusion into an accusation of his care. It worked. For a little while, I believed him. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe I was just tired, and his concern was being misinterpreted. But the feeling persisted, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. The isolation grew. Plans stopped being made. When I reached out, responses were delayed, conversations brief, strained. It was like watching my social circle shrink in real time, a slow, agonizing fade to black. I'd see photos pop up on social media, gatherings I hadn't been invited to, smiles that looked forced when they talked about me. They weren't cutting me off completely. That would be too obvious. They were carefully, gently, easing me out, as if I were a danger, a liability. One night, I overheard him on the phone. He was in the study, the door slightly ajar. His voice was low, serious. It's been really tough, honestly. She's just not herself. These mood swings. The paranoia. I'm doing my best, but it's exhausting. He paused, listening. No, she's not seeing anyone. She refuses. Thinks she's fine. That's the hardest part, isn't it? When they don't see it themselves. It's like walking on eggshells. I just worry about her, you know? I had to cancel that dinner because, well, you just never know how she'll be. My blood turned to ice. Mood swings? Paranoia? Refuses help? He wasn't saying I was stressed. He was painting a picture of someone unraveling, someone mentally unstable. Someone who needed to be handled carefully, kept away from polite society. Someone who was, in his narrative, having a breakdown. And the reason? The truth, when it hit me, was like a physical blow. It wasn't about protecting me. It wasn't about his concern. It was about him. He was setting the stage. For what? I didn't know yet. But painting me as unstable, unreliable, even potentially dangerous, would benefit him somehow. Maybe he wanted out of the marriage without looking like the bad guy. Maybe he wanted control over something, finances, assets. Or maybe it was just about control itself, the twisted pleasure of pulling the strings and watching me become a pariah. Whatever the endgame, my perceived mental state was the key. And he was systematically dismantling my credibility, brick by painstaking brick, using our friends as his unwitting accomplices. Despair washed over me, cold and deep. How do you fight something like that? How do you prove you're sane when the person closest to you is telling everyone you're not, and doing it with such convincing, heartbroken sincerity? My word against his. The seemingly devoted husband worried, sick about his troubled wife. They would believe him. They already were. I felt trapped, the walls closing in, the air growing thin. I wanted to scream, to rage, to run. But where? Who would believe me? The isolation was almost complete. It felt like I was disappearing, fading into the distorted image he was creating. For weeks, I spiraled, pacing the floor at night, replaying conversations, dissecting every look, every hesitated word from a friend. The man I loved, the man I'd built my life with, was systematically destroying my reputation, my relationships, perhaps even my sense of self. He was poisoning the well, and I was drinking from it, feeling the poison seep into my veins. I considered just leaving, walking away, disappearing for real. But the thought of him getting away with it, of him rewriting our history and leaving me as the cautionary tale, the poor, unstable wife, it gnawed at me. It wasn't fair. It wasn't true. One evening, sitting alone in the quiet house, the silence amplifying my despair, a different feeling began to stir. A cold, hard anger. Not the hot, volatile kind that explodes and fades, but a deep, steady burn. He thought he could erase me? Spin his lies and make me vanish? Use my own life, my own relationships as his chessboard? No. Not without a fight. Not without knowing the full, ugly truth would eventually surface. But how to surface it? How to prove a lie that was told in hushed tones, behind closed doors, framed as loving concern.
It struck me then.
His lie wasn't just words in the air. It had consequences. It had actions attached to it. Friends canceled plans. Invitations stopped coming. He controlled the narrative, and to do that, he controlled the communication. He was careful, yes, but careful people leave traces. Small, almost invisible breadcrumbs that, when gathered, form a devastating trail. My despair didn't vanish, but it was joined, and then slowly overtaken, by a cold, calculated resolve. I wouldn't disappear. I wouldn't let him define me. I would fight back, not with anger, but with truth. And the truth, unlike his carefully constructed fiction, had evidence. I began to watch him, truly watch him, with new eyes. Every phone call, every text message, every email, every interaction with a friend. I started documenting. Not just what he said to me, but what he did. The times he conveniently forgot to give me a message. The times he intercepted a call or text. The times he subtly steered conversations away from me. It was tedious, soul-crushing work, feeling like a detective in my own marriage, but the anger fueled me. I went through old emails, old texts, looking for patterns, for confirmations. I found seemingly innocuous messages from friends asking if I was okay, which I had never seen because they had somehow been buried or deleted. I found messages where he vaguely alluded to my issues, fishing for concern. It was like piecing together a grotesque puzzle. Each piece was small, but together, they formed a clear, undeniable picture of a deliberate, sustained campaign. Then came the invitation. The annual summer reunion at the lakeside house of mutual friends, Mark and Sarah. It was the event of the year for our group, a tradition stretching back 15 years. My heart seized up when I saw the email, forwarded by Mark with a casual, "Looks fun, huh?" He didn't ask if I wanted to go. He just presented it as a given, knowing, I suspected, that the general assumption among our friends was that I wouldn't be there. The unstable wife wouldn't be up for such a large gathering. He had created the perfect reason for my absence. The thought of walking into that room, facing all of them, knowing what they thought of me, it was terrifying. Humiliating. The path of least resistance was clear. Decline, stay home, fulfill the role he'd written for me. Let him go, play the part of the long-suffering husband, solidify his narrative, and let me fade into the background, the woman who couldn't handle life. It was the easy way out. But the anger was a steady flame now, burning away the fear. This wasn't just about my reputation anymore. It was about my life. My reality. He was trying to steal it, twist it into something ugly and false. And the reunion wasn't a trap he'd set for me. It was the stage he'd built for himself. And I realized, with a surge of cold adrenaline, that it could also be my stage. The place where his carefully constructed lie could be dismantled, in front of the very people he'd manipulated. The fear was still there, a tremor in my hands as I typed my RSVP. Yes. Attending. I felt a grim sense of calm settle over me. This wasn't going to be about begging for understanding or explaining myself. It was going to be about facts. About proof. He wanted to paint me as irrational? Fine. I would be meticulously, undeniably rational. I would show them the paper trail that was more powerful than any emotional appeal. The weeks leading up to the reunion were a blur of preparation. Not packing swimsuits and sundresses, but organizing my evidence. Screenshots of texts he'd withheld, showing friends asking after me, expressing concern based on things he'd told them. Emails where he canceled plans on my behalf, citing my health or fragility. A damning voice memo, accidentally recorded on my phone, of him telling his friend James, in graphic detail, about my supposed meltdown after a minor disagreement. Financial records showing large sums of money moved from our joint account into a private one only he controlled, starting right around the time he began his campaign. Each piece was a dagger sharpened and ready. I didn't confide in anyone. Not a single soul. This was my fight. My secret operation. The isolation that had been his weapon had become my shield, allowing me to prepare in silence, unseen. He was so confident in his narrative, so sure I was either too fragile or too unaware to fight back that he didn't see it coming. He saw the RSVP, I'm sure. Probably assumed I'd change my mind, or arrive looking like the wreck he described. His overconfidence was my greatest asset. The day of the reunion dawned bright and clear, mocking the storm brewing inside me. Getting ready felt surreal. I chose a simple, elegant dress, did my hair and makeup carefully. Not to look strong, but to look normal. To contradict, in every visible way, the image he had painted. I felt like an actress putting on a costume, preparing for the performance of my life. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Fear, yes, but also a steely resolve that had hardened into something unbreakable. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the witness, the prosecutor, and the judge all rolled into one. Walking into that conservatory, the initial shock, the silence, the stares, it was exactly as I'd anticipated. Maybe worse. The air felt thick with unspoken judgment, with the weight of the narrative they had all accepted. Mark's frozen smile was a masterpiece of false concern, instantly recognizable to me now as the mask he wore for the world. He looked genuinely startled to see me, the calculated performance momentarily forgotten. He recovered quickly, though. Came towards me, arms outstretched, a picture of the relieved, loving husband. "Oh, Sarah, you made it." "I wasn't sure you've been," he trailed off, shaking his head slightly, a subtle performance for the audience. "Well, it's just so good to see you out and about." He reached for me, perhaps intending a hug, a display of ownership and his version of tenderness. I took a small step back, avoiding his touch. My voice, when I spoke, was quiet, steady, cutting through the lingering silence. "Yes, Mark. I made it. Wouldn't have missed it." My eyes scanned the faces around him. Sarah and Mark, James, Chloe, David, Lisa. All the friends who had drifted away, whose pitying glances and awkward silences had been the soundtrack to my isolation. Their expressions ranged from awkwardness to shock to a kind of fascinated horror. Mark's smile tightened, sensing something was off. "Everyone, look who's here," he said, forcing a cheerful tone, trying to regain control of the room, of the narrative. Sarah's feeling much better, the implication hung in the air. She was sick, but now, thanks to his care, she's slightly less of a problem. A few tentative smiles, nervous nods. Sarah murmured, "It's good to see you, Sarah." Her voice was laced with that familiar pity. This was it. The moment. The stage was set. The audience was captive. The protagonist and the antagonist were face to face. "Actually, Mark," I said, my voice still quiet, but carrying an iron edge that made heads turn. "There's something I need to clear up. With everyone here." His eyes flickered, a tiny spark of panic igniting in their depths. The mask wavered. "Clear up? What are you talking about, love? Can't this wait? Let's just enjoy the party." He tried to steer me away gently, his hand lightly on my arm this time. I shrugged it off.
"No, Mark.
It can't wait. It's waited long enough. 4 months now. Mark has been telling you all that I've been having a breakdown, that I'm fragile, paranoid, moody, unable to cope. That I refuse help." I paused, letting the words hang there, confirming the story they had heard. Murmurs rippled through the small crowd that had gathered, drawn by the tension. Faces turned from me to Mark, their confusion evident. Mark's face was starting to turn red. "Sarah, stop it. You're making a scene." "Am I?" I asked, my voice rising slightly, gaining strength. "Or are you afraid of the scene I'm about to make, Mark? Because the story you've been telling everyone, it's a lie. Every single word." His eyes narrowed, a cold, hard look replacing the panic. "Don't do this, Sarah." It was a threat, low and venomous. "Oh, I'm doing it," I said, and for the first time I smiled. A slow, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. I reached into my clutch bag. My hand didn't tremble. It felt steady, purposeful. I pulled out my phone. "You said I was paranoid?" I said, my voice clear and strong. Maybe I was. Enough to start looking. To start listening. To start documenting. I held up the phone, open to a specific message thread. "This, Sarah," I said, looking directly at our hostess, the woman who had pulled away so noticeably, is a text message you sent Mark 3 months ago, asking how I was doing because he told you I was barely functioning. It's a message I never saw because he deleted it from my notifications before I could. Just like he deleted Chloe's message asking if I was up for shopping. Just like he deleted dozens of messages from all of you, expressing concern based on the stories he was feeding you. I scrolled through, showing the phone to Sarah, then to Chloe, then to others who cautiously stepped closer, drawn by the undeniable proof flashing on the screen. Their faces, moments ago filled with pity, were now a mixture of confusion, dawning horror, and disbelief. He told you I was refusing help. I continued, my voice gaining momentum, building like a wave. Funny, because here's a screenshot of an email I sent to a therapist he recommended. A therapist, it turns out, who was a friend of his, instructed to report back to him. An email he intercepted and never sent. I swiped. And here, I said, turning to James, the recipient of the meltdown story, is a recording, an accidental one, thankfully, of Mark describing in vivid, false detail a paranoid episode I supposedly had. Listen, I press play. The recording was short, but devastating. Mark's voice, clear and distinct, weaving a cruel fiction. The sound filled the sudden, absolute silence in the room. Mark stood frozen, his face slack with shock, the carefully constructed mask having completely evaporated. He looked exposed, raw. And finally, I said, closing the recording app and opening another. Here are the financial records, showing significant amounts of money moved from our joint account to an offshore account only Mark has access to. Starting precisely when he began telling you all I was having a breakdown and needed to be taken care of, implying, I assume, that I was becoming incapable of managing our finances. I didn't show the screen this time, just held the phone. The number's a silent accusation. He wasn't protecting me.
He was isolating me, discrediting me,
building a case to take everything, using my own perceived vulnerability as his weapon. He didn't want a mentally ill wife. He wanted a convenient excuse to disappear with our assets and leave me behind, labeled and alone. The silence was deafening. Everyone was staring at Mark. His face, moments ago red with suppressed rage, was now pale. His eyes darted wildly, from me to the faces of our friends, searching for an ally, for a shred of the sympathy he had so carefully cultivated.
He found none.
Only shock, disgust, and betrayal. Then, the silence shattered.
He didn't speak.
He screamed, a guttural, animalistic sound of pure, blindsided fury. You bitch, he roared, lunging towards me. You set this up. You conniving psycho. I knew you were unstable. My friends reacted instantly. James and David stepped forward, blocking Mark's path. Sarah gasped, putting a hand to her mouth. Chloe stumbled back, eyes wide. Unstable. I repeated, my voice dangerously calm, cutting through his rage. Is that what you'll tell everyone now, Mark? That I'm unstable for exposing your lies? That I'm paranoid for finding the proof of your betrayal? I lowered the phone slowly, holding his gaze. His chest was heaving, his face contorted with a rage so potent it was almost tangible. He had been so sure of his control, so arrogant in his deception, that the reality of being caught, being exposed so publicly in front of his chosen audience, was destroying him. You think this is over? He spat, struggling against James and David who were holding him back. You think you've won? I'll ruin you. You tried to ruin me, Mark, I said softly, shaking my head. You tried to erase me. But you didn't count on me fighting back. You didn't count on the receipts. The word hung in the air, mundane and devastating.
Receipts.
Paper trails. The boring, undeniable proof that stood in stark contrast to his dramatic fiction. The reunion dissolved into chaos after that. Mark was eventually calmed down, or perhaps just escorted, shaking and spitting obscenities, away from the conservatory. Friends clustered around me, a mix of apologies, horrified questions, and dawning understanding. Sarah, tears in her eyes, hugged me tightly.
I'm so sorry, Sarah.
He told us. He was so convincing, Chloe was crying too. James looked grim, clapping my shoulder. It wasn't a triumph, not really. The vindication was immense. Yes, a cold, clean rush of air after months of suffocating lies. But it came at a cost. The carefully constructed facade of my marriage lay in ruins around me, the pieces sharp and dangerous. The friendships, strained and tested, would need time to heal, if they could heal at all. Some looked at me with lingering uncertainty, perhaps still grappling with the conflicting narratives. But they had seen the proof. They had heard him scream, not with the concern of a loving husband, but with the blind rage of a cornered liar. Leaving the reunion, the humid night air felt cool and cleansing on my skin. I wasn't the same woman who had walked in. The weight of the lie was lifted, replaced by the burden of the truth. My marriage was over, not with a whimper, but with a bang, a public, screaming expose. It was painful, messy, and utterly necessary. The days and weeks that followed were a blur of legal consultations, difficult conversations, and the quiet, painstaking process of rebuilding. The friends who were truly friends rallied around me, appalled by Mark's deception, offering support and a listening ear. Others drifted away permanently, perhaps too uncomfortable with the fallout or too invested in the image they had of him. Mark tried to fight, of course, to double down on the she's crazy narrative. But the evidence was irrefutable. His carefully documented lies, his financial maneuvers, his public outburst at the reunion, it all painted a very different picture than the one he'd intended. The man who tried to label his wife as unstable ended up exposing his own volatile, deceitful nature to everyone who mattered. He lost the house, the money he tried to hide, and the respect of the people he had used. He didn't just lose the marriage, he lost his carefully crafted reputation. There's no neat, tidy ending to a story like this. The scars remain, a reminder of how easily trust can be broken, how quickly reality can be warped. But there is freedom, there is truth, and there is the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I didn't let him win. I didn't disappear. I stood my ground, armed with nothing but the facts he tried to bury, and I reclaimed my story. The woman he tried to paint as fragile and broken walked through the fire and emerged, perhaps singed, but stronger, clearer, and undeniably, defiantly, whole. If this story hit close to home in any way, or if you simply want to share your thoughts, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. And thank you, truly, for being here, for listening. Subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life. Stories of resilience, of facing the darkness, and finding your way back to the light.